less is more, how to make civic tech sustainable and equitable by design. And the subtitle of the panel is to equip the civic tech community with the hardware, software, and organizational insights to build environmentally aware, equitable tech solutions. So I'm sure that's something we can take care of in an hour's time, no problem. But I will just probably scratch the surface of this topic. But it's a great topic, and I like the way that it's phrased. My name is Janet Gunter. I co-founded an organization called the Restart Project, which has really had a big ambition of changing our relationship with technology and better, probably slower and more mindful use of technology, starting with repairing and reusing, but a much more expansive vision that has a lot in common with a lot of the panelists today. So I'm really happy to be here. I guess for the first question is, like, everyone is here maybe is familiar with what civic tech means, but I think it's probably important just to remind that Code for All, who's hosting today, says civic tech, in short, is technology that positively impacts society, but that's not the whole story. And they go on to basically say how matters, how we build this technology matters. And I think it's a really important point, and that's pretty much a big part of today's topic. When we experienced COVID, I think for the first time, a lot of people in rich countries made the connection between the digital exclusion and digital inequalities and the huge amount of waste that we were making, that we were just binning laptops that certain children in our countries needed to attend school, to keep up with other children. But this is obviously a realization that people have had globally for a long time. It's just that rich countries were finally realizing that actually the inclusion and fairness agenda completely overlaps with the environmental agenda. So also in relation to supply chains, we saw that workers were really hit hard during COVID. The workers that build the very technology that we use were forced into unsafe conditions, were really struggling in terms of survival. And so again, we realized that the things that we depend on, the things that we are using to supposedly have positive impacts in society, actually have potentially quite negative impacts in the supply chain. And I just thought I'd remind everyone, for those who pay attention to all of these blockchain technologies and all of the hype around that, that I guess a funny event happened this month, that a large part of the blockchain moved to a allegedly more environmentally sustainable model. However, I liked how the editor of Bloomberg said, well, the transition to proof of stake has gone smoothly. I'm standing by for anybody to provide proof of why we actually need any of this. And I think that's a pretty important point. So we really need to think about, as we're building technology, do we really need it? And if we're building it, how should we build it in a way that takes planetary boundaries and people into account? So our panelists today will address this issue in different ways. We're going to kick off with Melissa Schung, who is the co-founder of CARL, a climate education platform. She's also an organizer for Climate Action Tech and a grad student at Columbia's Sustainability Management Program. And she's going to take us on a tech materials tour. So a dive into the supply chain, I hope. Take it away, Melissa.
Thanks so much, Janet. I'm just gonna share my screen for a sec. Great, so I'm going to share part of this tech materials tour that I created for a fellowship project with the Green Web Foundation. My goal is to reconnect digital and virtual back to physical reality and the earth. And what this means is that you might be on the internet or partying in the metaverse, but we're still on the planet using the Earth's resources. So before we go on the tour, let's talk about what sustainability means for digital technology. This is a life cycle diagram, and sustainability professionals use a model like this for life cycle assessments to measure the environmental impact of a commercial product or service. So each of these blocks represents a phase of the life cycle. And often when we talk about tech's footprint, we're focusing on the use phase. So for example, electricity and energy, which is in the news a lot lately for crypto and Ethereum, like Janet mentioned. There's also water use for cooling data centers. And we also talk about land use for data centers and internet infrastructure. Sometimes we also talk about waste and disposal. And I want to just recognize that these are all important environmental impacts. But today, I want to talk about the start of the life cycle where we extract raw materials and resources. And if you're thinking, I do civic tech, I'm not a hardware person, that's fine. That's a great question, you know, and it's an idea I want to challenge because hardware and software are connected. We can't make software without hardware, and software often determines whether hardware is usable. So it's kind of subtle, but let's move on to the tour. Now you know kind of like how everything's connected. So first we're going to go to the factory. This is usually where we think of electronics as coming from. This is in Portland, Oregon. It's the D1D fab for Intel. And, you know, it looks unnatural. And you can watch this video later, but it's these like robots zooming around. And again, it's like robots making more machines. Everything's machine and man-made. It's not natural. But the truth is, they're not making machines out of nothing. We're making it out of the earth. Actually use over 75 elements in a phone. So that's 92% of non-radioactive elements are found in our phone. Pretty much everything that won't kill us, we've put in our phone into our devices. And these minerals come from all over the world. So we're going to look at 3 mines. We don't have too much time, so I hope you'll like explore this on your own time. There's a ton of links and it's fun to zoom around Google Earth. The first mine we're going to is in Musonoi. It's the Democratic Republic of Congo. So this is like a really, really big mine. And next to it, this is a city of Kolwezi. About 500,000 people live here. It's the capital of the province. And you can just zoom in and see, you know, like this is the start of the battery for our phone. So cobalt is mined and it goes into lithium ion batteries. This is super important for the renewable energy transition. And this whole region has been mined for a long time as part of the copper belt. And here we can see all of these different industrial mines all in one location. This is what it looks like inside one of those factories, perhaps. And just to highlight what we're looking at here, you have an open pit. They're removing a ton of rock that gets crushed up and goes into these flotation tanks. And they concentrate the ore there. And at each of these stages, there's waste. So tailing storage is actually the waste and like liquids and chemicals from this process. And at the end, they refine it. And we're actually extracting a lot of material in order to get a little bit of metal. So for cobalt, you know, the rock to metal ratio varies widely, but in some places it can be greater than 2,000. So that means for 1 ton of earth that's removed, we're getting 1 pound of cobalt. And it's not always huge machines that are moving the earth. Sometimes we have this small scale mining, also known as artisanal mining. And as you can see, it's not exactly safe. There are children working here as well, and they're looking for cobalt in the open pit mines and in the industrial waste. In 2019, a human rights group sued US tech companies, including Google, Apple, Tesla, and Microsoft, for aiding and abetting in human rights abuses in the region, and the suit was dismissed. So next, we're going to go to a smaller mine over in Myanmar. So we're going kind of deep into the jungle here, but again, this mine is still near, you know, a population center. I'm gonna zoom in a little bit. So what we're mining here is rare earth elements. There are 17 of them, and they're pretty cool because they're luminescent, magnetic, electrical, and catalytic, and they're used in all parts of our devices. So from screens to speakers to vibration units. And to mine and process these ores, they dig these pits and then they fill them with acidic chemicals. And what's left behind is a toxic pool with radioactive residues that pollutes the air, land, and the drinking water. So during the rainy season, this is I mean, it's already a problem, but during the rainy season, this causes toxic landslides. So it's really dangerous. And the number of these mines are increasing. At a recent report, they said there were about 300. So you can kind of just zoom around and see, just find more of them sprinkled around the landscape. And Myanmar is really close to China. So China is sort of outsourcing its mining over to Myanmar because of the environmental damage that it causes. So the last mine we're going to go to is Spruce Pine. This is in North Carolina in the United States. Again, it's just, I mean, the first time I saw this, it was just so big and kind of like unbelievable that this is what it takes to make, you know, our phones and computers. And again, there's like a small town nearby. And you might notice it doesn't look quite the same as the other mines that we've looked at. And that's partly because of the type of mineral we're looking at and the ecosystem, but it's also because of regulation and history and politics and power. So a lot of the quartz goes to Norway to get refined, and they form these silicon ingots, which get sliced up and etched to form our microchips and microprocessors. So that's sort of like the abbreviated version of the tour. For our last stop, we got to go to the gift shop. So we're going to New York City. This is the Apple flagship store. And again, it's like so shiny and unnatural looking. But this also came from the earth. And I think it's just important to know that. And this isn't to make you feel guilty. I'm not trying to say like, don't buy a new computer. I actually had to buy a new computer because my old computer couldn't handle Zoom and Google Docs at the same time. So, but it's more to change our relationship with our work, you know, like are our digital solutions, which are usually like innovative and future thinking, but are we respecting where our devices and resources came from? So are we respecting the resources, energy, and lives that went into creating our tools and devices? Or are we contributing to the upgrade cycle and planned obsolescence? And so you can spin around and see all these people here waiting in line to buy a new product. That's it. Thank you. I'm really excited to be a part of this panel and hand it over to Aijalan, who's going to talk more about the other side of the life cycle.
I'll just do a quick, yeah, thank you, Melissa. That was amazing. It was a good opening. Just to introduce Aijalan Bodhi. He's recently thrown himself into front-end development after working in computer refurbishment in Lagos, Nigeria for years. He really has firsthand understandings of the impacts of e-waste and the cost of hardware obsolescence, the kind that Melissa just mentioned, as well as the rise of e-waste generated by the global South itself, which I think is a really important trend to acknowledge. Over to you, Aijalan.
Hi, I'm Aijalan. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's nice being here, having an opportunity to, discuss the benefits and the effects of e-waste in Africa and the causes. It's a good thing, talking about the problems, the challenges which e-waste have caused over time. And it's nice seeing Civic Tech like CART and Code for All Summit, having goals and ambition which are in tandem with the sustainable development goals of United Nations. So it's a pleasure to be here. So regarding the e-waste, as technology continues to advance and make our life better, there's actually a demand for computers, devices here in Africa. Talking about a continent of about 1.4 billion people, and Nigeria, leading that list with about 200 and 20 million or thereabouts. So there's definitely, bound to be a high demand for gadgets. However, the disruption of technology, it comes with a challenge for Africans in the sense that there are various factors, which hinders their access to technology and all. One of which are, the economic condition of Africa, talking about the poor conditions which we find ourselves, and And I mean, talking about factors like, corruption and bad government, office holders who are in charge, who are elected to, represent the interests of the people, go over there and, embezzle funds, which are meant for, infrastructure and all for the country. So talking about the factors, another factor would be the low minimum wage. I mean, for a country like Nigeria, the minimum wage for Nigeria is about 30,000 naira also monthly, and I mean it usually falls within the range of 30 to 50,000 naira. So, and 30 to 50,000 naira is about is less than $100 in it's less than $100. So you see, this low minimum wage is also a factor which which hinders Africans' access to technology and digital devices. And as our more of our activities, shift from the physical aspect to to a more digital kind of world, so there's bound to be a need for these devices. However, since the government cannot provide solutions, entrepreneurs have tried to hack so provide solutions to be like how can we solve this problem in in also why making profits of this. We went to the developed world by importing their e-waste. Since there's a common culture over there in the West, whereby individuals are usually disposing of their e-waste. However, it's not necessarily their fault. One of the causes are more of these softwares and applications which require more more energy and all. So you see, as people continue to dispose of their gadgets, we see that as an opportunity. That okay, we can retrofit these devices and make them not only presentable but also capable of of running more of these recent softwares and or like the common notion in the trading market is that the computer is only slow. I mean, a computer device is only slow just because the software it's working on can no longer it can't perform more of those software. So the solution is to upgrade them. So I'll be sharing my screen now to take you across how the process of the importation of e-waste and all. So, like I said, e-waste, as we all know, is one of the fastest growing type of waste in the world. But globally, the recycling of e-waste is optimally low. More than half of e-waste generated worldwide ends up in Africa. So there is, the problem of the problem Africa faces, talking about the factors, which hinders our access to digital devices. It's not like we do not desire to, purchase new system, but this economic factor which hinders us have constrained individuals to accessing this gadget. So therefore comes the importation of e-waste. So while retrofitting and or entrepreneurs, in the process of retrofitting and trying to make more profits, we usually import much more than we require, because in trying to mitigate the solution, we try to increase our odds and chances of making more profit. So next slide is as number of users in Africa continue to increase, and Nigeria tops the lead. So there's bound to be more demand for these devices. And devices themselves, they are not low, they are not bad. Like, I mean, the gadget, the electronic devices themselves, if they were created with other components, which makes them a whole. So while you dispose of your gadget over there, there are certain useful components within these devices and all. So this is a picture showing you the way of how we dismantle and how we disassemble these devices. So here also I have a picture which portrays the mode of how these devices are imported. Talking about how gadgets are usually imported to these um, containers and all. So, like I said, the device is usually comprises of a couple components whereby if the system stops working, there are other components which are possible, which could definitely work on other devices if assembled properly and with the basic measures. So we have components like the RAM, we have the hard drive, we have the keyboard, we have the battery. So when your system stops working, there are other parts that will definitely keep functioning along the line. So
Ajalon, just to say, we're going to be a bit harsh on time, so we have about 1 minute. If you can.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Thank
So
you.
these are the stores of how these e-waste are imported. And so you see a MacBook, a broken MacBook. We usually replace them by getting similar types of these. So we take the screen and replace it. So these are other parts. And so one of the factors impacting the high demands is economic condition of Africa, like I said, embezzlement, low minimum wage, and all. So you see, these are pictures that depicts how they've been retrofitted and how good they can be. So they are not really that waste, they are not really that bad and all. So like I said, one of now how modern software and application cause device obsolescence. Like Ismail will definitely talk about modern software require more energy and often slow down these devices. So now let me move down to benefit of retrofitting. Now, benefit of retrofitting, has advanced startups in Nigeria, and it has also created jobs, and it's economical, it's affordable, and it also helps in the sustainability of e-waste, so which affect our climate. And also these are the effects of retrofitting e-waste, frequent repairs, because some of these devices, their life cycle must have been shortened and more often. They usually develop fault and all. So another effect of retrofitting e-waste and importing waste in Africa is that there is no proper structure, no proper agency, that accepts the disposal of e-waste. For households, the disposal of our e-waste in landfill and dump sites. So this is the chain of distribution of how e-waste comes to Africa. See the end users in developed countries, then it's moved down to the recycling agencies, then the importers go over there to import this thing, and then they are the entrepreneurs who to do this, and then the end users. So this is the process of how e-waste disposal, operates in Nigeria. So from the households and the market, then there's buyers of disposable e-waste. People who buy these components, just to take the metals, the magnets, the copper.
Okay.
So these are pictures and depict the problems which most of these have, of course. So I will share my slides in case anyone wants to learn more about this. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Ajalon, also for highlighting that the end of life of a lot of the reused equipment is still problematic. But I think a lot of those images sometimes make people feel that it's kind of like a hopeless situation, when in fact there are policies that can be put into place for remediation and treatment of waste. It's just a matter of priority, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Okay, so we'll move on to Ismael. Ismael Velasco is a software developer, and a proponent of what he calls green mode design. He's going to talk all about that in this presentation. From looking at his profile, he's a serial volunteer and community organizer and the founder of Adora Foundation. And really interestingly, I found from reading all the way down his LinkedIn is that he has a master's degree in comparative world history, which always makes me quite interested to hear what somebody has to say. So take it away, Ismail. You need to unmute, please.
There I am. Apologies, I was having some display issues. Yes, thank you so much. I am thrilled to be here. I'm going to share my screen, and yeah, so we've had a fantastic overview of how sort of the production of all our devices creates a huge amount of toxicity, waste, injustice, exploitation, etc. We've also identified how some of that e-waste is lost, and in fact, most of it is not recycled, but the opportunities for retrofitting, such as Ayalon has been kind of pioneering really at scale. So now I'm going to bring it back to us as at the software side. I'm going to assume that most people here are engaged in some form of software, whether it's development or applications or mashups, etc. So let's dream a nice dream. Let's say that you've launched the extraordinary Tech for All app. You've reached 100,000 daily users in 3 months, and people are using it to save lives in 132 countries. Is that great? Is it? Well, let's see. What you didn't know is that even as you're saving all those lives, you're also killing the planet. Your app will generate about 2,500 tons of CO2 in the coming year, equivalent to burning 1.5 million kilograms of coal. So it's as if you were burning 1 million kilos of coal yourself with your life-saving app. 100,000 users each day will stay about 90 minutes on your app, which is the equivalent each day of 17 years of device usage, or 5 device lifetimes per day. So every day you're essentially getting rid of 5 mobile or laptops, which may not sound like a lot, but it adds up. Your app will be responsible for 1,500 tons of e-waste this year, of which 1,300 will not be recycled. The e-waste you facilitate because of those devices that are used, all those hours that are spent on your app, will have enough lead, mercury, and lithium that it will poison millions of liters of water for children who will suffer irreversible brain damage as a result. And your app is just getting started. You're doing fantastically. It's expected to rapidly grow, as will its deadly consequences. So probably, along with Sir Morris here, you might be feeling a little bit down that your app is saving lives, but also causing lives. So is there any hope? Well, I would not be here if there wasn't. And there are ways in which we can develop our apps that do not necessarily have that level of deadliness on the environment and on all of the chain that we create. So what we need is just a little bit more green. I'm going to introduce 4 concepts: green by default design, green mode design, green partnerships, and green voice. And I'm going to suggest that if you include these 4 dimensions into all of your apps, you will not be taking away with one hand what you're contributing with another, and your social impact and your social good will not be compromised. So let's start with green by default. What would be the 3 questions that you would need to ask of your software team, whether that is in your own organization or if you're paying someone to build you an app or a website? So the first question is our app hosted with a green cloud provider? So a lot of the direct emissions of your app will come from the server infrastructure. That's going to be the biggest direct emission. And if you have a green host, that could really be your quickest win if you can move toward a cloud provider. Now, the main green cloud providers are the big 3: Google, Azure, and AWS, in that order of environmental awareness. But all of them are investing into renewable energy, into carbon neutrality, into scalability and performance. So if you host your app in those 3, your emissions will, and your contribution to the destruction of the planet will dramatically drop, and it's very quick. Now, you have to remember that each of those apps have different availability zones. You have to make sure that it's a green one, because some of them are not. If you have a simpler thing like a website, then the Green Web Foundation has a list of green hosts. I'm not going to dwell on this too much because there's other ground I want to cover. But again, the key thing is to remember, this is a question that you ask of your developers. Is our app hosted with a green cloud provider? The second source, the second biggest source of direct emissions from your app will be the data that is transferred. Every time that someone sort of hits your website or your app and makes a request, every time that you send a video or an image, you are causing CO2 emissions. And you are also consuming the battery power and the set of life of the devices that are using your app. So you are causing all of that wider degradation that we've mentioned. And then you have, what you need to ask is, what are we doing to optimize? This is something that everyone is doing already, but it has great environmental value. So are we sending the minimum amount of data that we can? Are we caching a lot, etc.? This is a technical question you can ask of your dev team. But essentially, are we green hosted? And are we using the minimum amount of data? And how do we know? And that leads us to the third one, which is impact monitoring. Do you know your app's impact from the cradle to the grave? No app is 100% green. So if you can't track it, you can't fix it. So green by default means built-in ways to track your app's environmental impact. There are tools out there, from simple website graders to sophisticated grid and code. There you can benchmark your performance around the speed, the design checklists, your electricity, etc. But again, the key principle is ask your devs and yourself as a team, how are we monitoring our environmental impact? If you're not monitoring it, you can be pretty confident that you're destroying it. So make sure that you are. Now, the green mode design concept is a newer one. It's something that I am proposing as a way of addressing the issues that Melissa and Ayalon mentioned. So even if you have a super green website, everything is optimized. If you've got 100,000 people spending 90 minutes on it, the 90 minutes of their machines being on, of their screens being on, of their batteries being on, is what's actually going to kill the planet. More than any other impact, the biggest environmental impact is the impact of your consumers, of the people using their devices. So the longer they spend on your app, obviously the better it is for you, but the worse it is for the environment. So how do we fix this? So again, what are the questions that you can ask your dev team? Number one, do we offer graceful degradation? What does that mean? That means that you give your users the option to degrade functionality for lower energy consumption. So as an example, you could say, if I'm not going to be if I'm just going to be listening to a talk on video, I don't really need to see it. So I have the option of just using sound. If I don't need to
Ishmael,
listen.
this is all very awesome checklists for awesomeness, but I'm just letting you know that you're almost at the end of your time. So
thank you. Okay, well, I'll hurry it up. So I'll just give you one example of what this looks like. This would be it would be your website. So for example, you would be able to have, for example, your images being optional. You could provide reader mode, and you could provide maximum compatibility so that you are able to be as backward compatible as possible. What that means is that you create a really, really, really minimal version of your app. Now, it doesn't mean that that's what most people use. Most people use the one with bells and whistles most of the time. But you give people the option of being able to degrade their experience of a site in order to reduce their environmental footprint. So
I think, Ishmael, you're gonna have to figure out how to squeeze this into the questions the rest of your presentation.
Okay, so I'll finish now then with the sort of last two bits very quickly, which are you can't be expected to know everything. So get some green partners to help you. You focus on your mission, but partner with green partners who can help you ask those questions of your dev team. And finally, I'm going to stop sharing here. Use your voice. Ensure that those questions, if you're not in charge, bring it to your team. Make sure that the questions that I mentioned are being asked so that the apps that you are developing are not just life-saving and life-enhancing, but also environmentally responsible and sustainable. Thank you, and thank you, Janet, for your patient, kind encouragement to land in time.
Okay, next, Sandra, I feel for you because the quicker you can present, the better. So we have some time for questions. Sandra Pallier is by day an interaction designer at Microsoft, and in her free time, co-founder and co-organizer of Climate Action Tech, and is a community animator and illustrator. Part of the community, she's an animator and illustrator. And I'd encourage you to check out her green design principles for inspiration, although I think she might be talking about that right now. Over to you, Sandra.
I actually won't be talking about that, so you can check that out in your own time. But yeah, what I'm going to be talking about today is changing tech culture. So we've explored the impact of creating tech and how we might be able to extend the lifetime of tech, both through reuse at the end of the life cycle, but also through software interventions like the green mode design that Ismail mentioned. The question that remains is, how can we actually change tech culture more broadly? And that kind of also brings me back how you might relate to all of this content. So first, you can get a sense of what tech culture is through following the trails of what's seen as a priority in the workplace. So a great place to start to hunt for clues are the processes that validate work and make shift decisions. For example, if the experience is a priority in a company, then there might be a lot of rounds of user research to nail the user flow. If accessibility is a priority, maybe there's a no-ship decision unless there's a AAA score for web accessibility. If privacy is a priority, maybe there's a privacy review with legal teams before a feature is published. And then another clue that you might find lies in training and career progression. So what training is available or mandatory? So I work at Microsoft, and for example, at Microsoft, there's mandatory security training. And you can see, therefore, how security is a priority at Microsoft. And then you can also look at resourcing. So what is money being spent on? For example, at Microsoft, again, Lucas Joppa was made our first chief environmental officer in 2018, which kind of, cemented the priority of sustainability as well. And through this analysis of your workplace, you might find things that you appreciate about your culture, Like for me, accessibility being so important is something I really appreciate, but you might also find things that you don't appreciate, like the fact that sustainability is currently not really incorporated into the software development process at my workplace. So once you know what's good and what's not good about the culture in your workplace, you might want to see how you could change the not so good things. And when you think about how companies can change, you could think about it through outside pressure. So this is media, politics, customers, market pressure, or employees applying pressure from the outside. Or you could think about change from the inside. So that can happen through top-down change, like bringing in new leaders or a change in programs or values, or it can be brought about by bottom-up grassroots initiatives. And tech workers in this bottom-up role tend to have a lot of power relative to other industries. And often that power is also welcomed by leadership. Again, an example from Microsoft is that our global sustainability community has been celebrated over the years, even though the community often asks very difficult questions and pushes hard for more change in the sustainability space. In general, it's often the combination of outside and inside pressure kind of playing together to create a shift to prioritize sustainability. And now I guess the question is, how does all of the culture change and understanding the culture that your company is in, how does that relate to you? So after spending some time looking at your own workplace culture and tech culture more broadly, you might be able to identify what you like and what you think should be changed. And then 2 questions to get you started are, what do I want to see changed? And the second one, where do I have power and what's my area of influence? The first question kind of helps you find your focus. And the second one is about figuring out your role in this entire space. So for me, my answers were and still are as follows. What do I want to see changed? I want sustainability to be part of the decision-making in design and development. And I want us to ship less stuff and clean up our messes more. And the second question, where do I have power and what's my area of influence? So I've got power in speaking up and asking uncomfortable questions internally without the potential fear of losing my job. And I can influence my own projects as well as the wider design community at my workplace in Microsoft. And then it's about speaking up and asking questions like the ones that Ismail kind of listed. And even if you don't get satisfying answers to begin with, bringing up those hardware and software sustainability questions in all hands meetings, resourcing discussions, and Q&As with your leaders will remind everyone in the room about sustainability. And when you speak up and talk about these things, it's often useful to link back to company-wide sustainability commitments or goals as well. It's also about finding allies at this point. So at Microsoft, we formed a green design V team with designers from around the globe and from various different teams. And from then on, it's smooth sailing. Not really though, because all of it is a lot of work and you need to keep an eye on your level of energy and your work-life balance, because changing culture is a thing that takes time and you need to be in it for the long run, which is why you need to kind of also take care of yourself in the process. And especially in big corporations, change happens slowly. And while it might feel like nothing is moving, you will see the progress when you start looking back. So for me, I've seen Microsoft go from being relatively quiet about sustainability projects and in communications to making bold company-wide commitments publicly. And I saw myself go from being the only designer really that I knew of thinking about digital sustainability to having a group of passionate individuals around me who are eager to take action. And I've seen new jobs being created and new priorities being set across different internal groups. And I guess the idea here is that if we create these movements across different companies, we'll be well on our way to change tech culture globally. So you can see this as a rallying cry. Figure out what you want to see changed and where you can have influence, and then just get started. Because ultimately, the fact of the matter is that we've all got a role to play in this space. Thank you.
Okay. I feel like I was invited to moderate this panel because I would be provocative, and so I'm asked to respond to some of what's been said, and I'll keep it really short so you can ask your questions. I do wonder, based on Sandra's rallying cry, how we hold these companies to account. So they have made great commitments, but you talk about internal dynamics of companies, but we live within a very crushing economic system. What's going on in the C-suite? What are shareholders asking for? These are all important questions, I suppose. And even more so in smaller companies where you have a couple people holding the purse strings, let's say. Another thing that strikes me is that we're not really skilled in what matters. That I think a lot of what we touched on today is like there's massive skill gaps, and globally there are inequities in who has the skills. So for example, Ajalon has a lot of the skills that we probably need here in the UK and that we've lost, but also are there the skills that in emerging countries that could actually help us promote Ismail's agenda? And why haven't we kind of heard this bubbling up from those countries where people struggle on low bandwidth, they struggle with their energy bills? Is it that the skills are completely lacking globally, or is it that they're dispersed in the wrong place? And then another thing I think I really heard from all the presentations was, don't be afraid to think in terms of systems and to understand power relationships. And I mean, I think that obviously civic tech community is good at that in what relates to participation, political participation, but not necessarily in what relates to the environment. So I think we need to apply that analysis that we can do in political participation to the planet and to people. And the last thing that I took from all the presentations was that nobody is going to do this work for us. We have to network, and we have to just start where we're at. No one is going to swoop in and save us. No billionaire is going to save us. This work is urgent. And I guess I wonder whether we're moving fast enough, but that's the question of our time. So over to participants to ask the tough questions for me. Go ahead. We had a couple, didn't we, Ismail, to start, but let's see if they'll be useful.
Yeah, and there was, Janet, there was one, it's not already answered, but I think it would be good to share it out loud. So it's from Wim. It says, Ismail, is there an open source library that you can recommend for tracking the environmental impact of apps? I know you already shared the response in the, like in written form, Ismail, but I don't know if you want to share with the rest of the audience.
Sure. I've shared I think the question that was asked was sort of quite technical in the sense of what are the tools that we can use to measure our footprint, and there are lots, and some of them are very simple and some of them are more complex. In my presentation, I suggested that the important thing is that you start. And so you start measuring at the simplest level, is it fast? And then you just keep adding sophistication, and some of it, some of the tooling will allow you to measure sort of the grid intensity and your code intensity and all of these things. So it can get quite sophisticated. But in this case, the measurement, the precision of the measurement is not the important thing, it's the trajectory. Is to be able to say, I started here and I'm making progress, because nothing is precise in this area. Everything is kind of approximate. But the important thing is that we are saying, this is where we started and this is where we're getting. So I've shared a few things. For those of you who are who are not software developers, but are obviously in the tech space, in my blog, which I also shared, there is sort of one pinned introduction to sort of green web, green software. So if you want to kind of have a bird's eye view into how you become a bit more environmentally responsible in tech, that might be a good entry point too.
Somebody initially asked, what's the bare minimum that civic tech organizations should be doing to minimize carbon emissions? I think we kind of answered that and slightly said, bare minimum is not the place to start. You need to look at all of these things. Then there was a question about how can the global community work together to make civic tech a more sustainable and equitable space? That's a very good question. Does anyone want to take a stab at that one?
I think, I mean, it kind of makes sense for me to plug our own community where we're trying to go for exactly that. So getting started at climateaction.tech and joining the SAC community is a great way to kind of make those connections and learn from each other. Because I think ultimately, if we want to work together as a global community on this, we do need to be open and sharing what's been working, and also like open and sharing what future we want to see as well, and kind of, yeah, talking about those possible futures in order to make them a little bit more tangible and real.
I'm particularly interested, Aijalan, how can civic tech engage more with people like yourself, or people who maybe don't even really necessarily know what's meant by civic tech, but that they're interested in software and hardware for good, but they wouldn't necessarily come into these spaces. How can we connect with your communities?
You're muted.
Basically, I would say there should be more sensitization of the effects of of e-waste and also the importance, like the benefits. It's not just disposing of these gadgets. They can be recycled. They can be recycled properly. For the benefit of either people who don't have access to this, or public libraries, and also I believe there should be more information out there. That can reach out to people like us, or people in developing part of the world, who do not know much about this. So and I think the United Nations is actually doing more of this. So I believe sensitization is the most important. Just to reach out to most people, and to be aware of, because the effect, the benefits, and also.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of proactive work has to happen to reach beyond the usual suspects, the places that we're already communicating. Ismail, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I was going to go in that direction too. I think sort of my experience is that generally the environmental movement is a very positive echo chamber. It's a really good one. But basically, you tend to be already persuaded, and then you're talking to everybody who's already there. And we tend to segment a lot. So for me, this is where this partnership is really important. So I think the civic tech community, in relation to the original question, has a huge role in inviting the green software, green web, green IT movement into their spaces, because the green spaces are already talking about it, right? So really, if you're able to invite these networks so that they become intertwined and they're not happening one or the other. And the other thought I had was around the first question, which actually I think is really important, of what is the minimum that we should do? And the minimum is what we control, right? What is it that you control that could have the biggest impact? And what you control most is the design of your application. So we've given a few set of tools and approaches, but the important thing is the commitment. If you just commit, I think if you want to say, what is the minimum? Commit to asking environmental questions of your applications. That's it.
Well, commit and do it, please.
Exactly.
Don't make commitments like the big tech companies and then kick the can 5 and 10 years.
Yeah, no, by commit, yes. I mean real commitment. In other words,
okay.
Sort of choose.
Oh, I've got frozen Ismail. Is everybody else?
Yeah.
That may be helpful because we have one last question, which is, and I'm sure we can, we'll have an answer in 30 seconds on this one. What does the panel think of the need to address the growth agenda of tech companies? There's a second part of it, but Melissa, do you have any ideas on this one?
I'm going to say it starts with I think everybody said this, imagination and talking to people. It's very hard to commit without a community. We're social beings. I'm actually a huge introvert, but I couldn't do this without the community, and there's no way to learn it all on your own. Like being together with everybody here is really special. So I would say you don't have to join our community, but you can join. There are plenty of climate tech communities, and that will help your commitment like have teeth and move forward.
And how do we address the growth agenda of these big tech companies?
I think you have to start talking about it. Like right now, I will say like somebody did talk about degrowth and it was big like, whoa, I don't know if I'm ready to talk about this, like this stuff, right? So if you can't even talk about it, I don't think we're gonna we don't have the power to hold companies to account. So like start talking. It doesn't feel like enough, but I mean, look at how fast QAnon grew, right? Like we can do more. We're like based in reality. We can do more.
Wow. Okay. No, I take that as a challenge. So we need to outdo QAnon, and we need to infiltrate major companies and work faster than QAnon.
Yeah, maybe make it a game or something. Make it a
brilliant, brilliant. Well, thank you everyone for your input. It's been really good to hear all these different perspectives and to hear, I'm not going to say solutions because I feel like, yeah, we're still, as Melissa suggests, we're maybe a little far from those, but that we can find community. And Sophia from Code for All is going to let you know about the rest of the summit, and we hope you can join some of those.
Thank you, Janet. Thank you all of the panelists. It was really interesting. I know there are a lot of questions also. There was an extra question, but maybe we can try to see if we can answer it later on. So I just want to share with you, as I mentioned, this is the first day. All of the sessions are recorded. You're going to find the recording on the YouTube channel. So if you missed or you have to leave early or you wanted to check the questions, you can take a look at there. And I'm also going to invite you to join our Slack channel where you can find more information about the network, our members, what we're doing. And I put there in the chat some links where you can join our Slack, where you can join our newsletter, and where you can take a look at the rest of the program for the Good for All Summit. This is day 1, so we still have 3 more days to go. And thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Janet, and thank you all the panelists.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye. Thank you.